Hey, gang, please stop voting. Stop voting on the Friday poll question at Smerconish.com. Already 1,000 or so have voted, and they have the wrong answer. The Friday poll question: why are fewer Americans drinking alcohol? Four choices, all one word, or each one word. Alternatives: cost, health, isolation. I must explain and try and convince you. First, let me mention Joe Ellis next Thursday night at Parks Casino. Do you have your tickets yet? It's a great gig. It's a great opportunity for us to go and to watch as Joe brings her comedic talents to Parks Casino in the Philly burbs. Joe Ellis, the one-time Smerconish.com newsletter editor, Joe Ellis, the 16-year veteran of the Virginia National Guard, Joe Ellis, the Black Hawk helicopter pilot who served her nation overseas and is being drummed out of the military because she's trans. And then recently made an appearance on Kill Tony with Tony Hinchcliffe and killed it. And it's launched her comedic career, and now she's coming to Parks. It's Thursday, August 21. She's going to perform at a Parks Casino comedy night with host Joe Conklin and national headliner Ian Lara, who has an HBO comedy special called Romantic Comedy, now streaming on HBO Max. It's a great deal. It's $25, and your first drink is included. You can buy your tickets now because you need them at parkscasino.com/entertainment. Parkscasino.com/entertainment. When I went to the link, I had to look for the comedy tab, and there it was. August 21, next Thursday, Parks Casino. Got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Yesterday at Smerconish.com, 35,673 cast ballots on this question: will the war between Russia and Ukraine end within the next 6 months? 81.34% said no. 18.66% of us, because I was in the minority again, said yes. Now, I'm in good company because yesterday, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis was my guest on air, as he is on a weekly basis. He optimistically said that he thought that there would be a cease to the conflict within the next 6 months. Although, I must say this, as I worded the question, I was speaking not of ceasefire, I was speaking end of the war. And Admiral Stavridis, if you listen to that conversation, and we released it as a podcast, it's really worthy. And as we await the outcome of today's Trump-Putin meeting, it might be a good time to get a good briefing by listening to that podcast. He was thinking more ceasefire. I don't, to be fair to Admiral Stavridis, I don't think that, like yours truly, he thought it would all come to an end. On one thing, we both clearly agreed, and that was that there are two big buckets that need to be resolved. One, borders, and two, future security. What concessions, I mean, to be more specific about borders, what concessions will, by the way, as I'm speaking about yesterday's poll result, will the war between Russia and Ukraine within the next 6 months, will it end? Literally at this moment, the president's motorcade is arriving at Joint Base Andrews, pulling up to Air Force One as he is about to depart for Anchorage. I saw that that Putin's got like a 2-time zone, I think a 12-hour journey for him. President's got a long flight as well. It's going to be a long and very interesting day. But those big buckets, borders and future guarantees, what concessions will Ukraine make relative to land? That Ukraine will make relative to land that Russia has taken during the course of their 3.5-year invasion, and what's the future going to look like? Those are the two biggies. Okay, the Friday poll question. I'm really worked up over this because, oh my gosh, come on, gang, you're not getting it. Why are fewer Americans drinking alcohol? That is the question. It's based on this Gallup data that came out 2 days ago. We talked about it extensively on air. The percentage of adults who say they consume alcohol has fallen to 54%. Gallup has tracked America's drinking habits since 1939. This is the lowest. This is the lowest that it's ever been. What has been the highest? The highest has been 70% in the late 1970s, between 68 and 71%. So let's just say 70% in the late 1970s. Now we're at 54%. If the data is accurate, and I say if the data is accurate because I believe alcohol is on the decline, but holy smokes, a fall of 19 points in the last 2 years among Republicans? What accounts for that? And there's some really interesting demographic changes when you look at men versus women, not only the Republicans versus Democrats, but by age and so on and so forth. But that's where it stands. And many people are now wondering, okay, what is the explanation? And I've done a great deal of reading on this. And common what would I say? I don't know if it's a consensus, but many people, how about that? Many people with expertise. It's not just anecdotal, but many people with expertise are saying that they think it's a health reaction. And my response is to say, okay, I get it with, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Maha movement had a good story in the newsletter yesterday about that. People may be more health conscious. But really, 20% drop among Republicans, 70% to 54, because all of a sudden we say, oh, alcohol is not good for us? I don't think so. Since 1939, people have been told that alcohol is not good for us when Gallup started this survey. Others say cost, because to go out and to have a drink is expensive. I think there's probably truth in that if you do go out. Alternatives, when I wrote alternatives, I meant that there are alternatives in terms of legal weed in a number of states, and also alternatives in the appeal of the non-alcoholic drinks. So I said alternatives, and I think that's a strong alternative in itself. But mingling is the explanation as to why fewer Americans are drinking alcohol. I didn't want to use the mingling word. And so, frankly, I went looking for a synonym, and I came up with isolation. And isolation is not doing well in the early voting. What am I talking about when I say isolation? I'll give you a great example of what I'm talking about. There was a piece that Derek Thompson wrote for The Atlantic, and it begins this way. In January, The Atlantic's Ellen Cushing published an essay with an admirably blunt title, Americans Need to Party More. Burrowing into the appendix tables at the American Time Use Survey, she unearthed the fact that just 4.1% of Americans say they attended or hosted a party or ceremony on a typical weekend or holiday in 2023. In other words, in any given weekend, just 1 in 25 households plans to attend a social event. ADIS is a government questionnaire that asks a large sample of Americans how much time they spend doing just about everything: sleeping, working, grooming themselves, playing with their pets, going to parties. Between 2003 and 2024, the amount of time Americans spent attending or hosting a social event declined 50%. There's the answer. Between 2003 and 2024, the amount of time Americans spent or attended or hosted a social event declined by 50%. And then Ellen Cushing's piece, I went and pulled it. And tell me if this paragraph sounds like your upbringing, because it certainly sounds like mine. When I was a kid, my parents and extended family, that's another thing, smaller families, fewer number of cousins, fewer numbers of aunts and uncles, less socializing, another factor. When I was a kid, my parents and extended family used to have serious parties on a regular basis. I remember houses and yards full of people, music all the way up, lots of food, and of course, free-flowing alcohol. Neighbors, family, coworkers, their friends, they all showed up, and likewise, my parents went to their parties. I thought that is what my adult years would be like, but they aren't. She posted that and it went viral. I think she's onto something with this assessment. And consequently, I think that the reason why we're seeing such a decline in drinking is what I label as isolation. But of course, I'm speaking of mingling. I will tell you something else, a little sort of bonus course here, if you don't mind. Because of and by the way, as I speak now, the president has boarded Air Force One and they are ready for liftoff. because of all the attention, this is kind of a bummer, but I want to share something with you. Because of all the attention on the Putin Trump summit today, a planned special taping that I was to do tomorrow for CNN has been scrapped because the resources needed for the crew instead are being committed toward, there goes the plane. It's a hell of an aircraft. Beautiful plane. My God. The resources necessary to tape the special program that I was going to do tomorrow are being used for follow-up coverage to the big summit. I was recording a program tomorrow, scheduled to record a program tomorrow that was supposed to air Labor Day weekend on CNN. And when they asked for a show in advance, think about this. I need to do a program that's an evergreen, something that's going to stand up regardless of what the news might be that weekend. That's what I did July 4th. The July 4th weekend, I had a similarly themed program. So for Labor Day, the show that I was to record tomorrow that would have gone on air in 2 weeks, Robert Putnam was to be my lead guest. Robert Putnam wrote Bowling Alone 25 years ago. He's the Harvard political scientist, and he was prescient in this regard on the whole isolation or mingling theme. So I'd written my opening commentary. I had already laid out exactly what I was going to say, and we were working hard to have a number of full screens, as we call them, or SOTs, which are video with sound elements, to flesh out what I'm about to tell you. So imagine as I'm saying this, it's going to lose some of its effect, but imagine as I'm saying this that you're seeing the supporting documentation for what I'm saying. I was going to begin by saying this. Let's stop bowling alone. I'm Michael Smerconish from the Philly Burbs. Today, something different, a program dedicated to one theme, connectivity, only not the internet kind. Intermittently, for the last few years, I've conducted many interviews here and on SiriusXM about our political and societal disconnect. I've come to refer to this as the Mingle Project, shorthand for my advocacy for us to reestablish common experience with our neighbors in a bid to unify the nation and improve the mental health of our children. 25 years ago, Harvard political scientist Robert Putnam saw it all coming with his best-selling book, Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community. He'll join me in a moment. And so too will other guests with a unique insight on this same theme. Putnam recognized that we were becoming a society of loners where we had been a society of joiners, and he used a simple image to capture the change. Where we'd once bowled together, now we are bowling alone. And then I went on to provide some of the additional background about Putnam's thinking and some of my own thinking. I cite the fact that in 2023, Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, declared loneliness had become an epidemic. I talk about America confronting a crisis of nostalgia. You know, this feeling that at some point America has been great, but nobody seems to think, not even the MAGA people, nobody seems to think that America is great today. And that in this era, when we're deeply divided and lonely and glued to our screens that are feeding us rage bait, this sense of lost greatness is having a corrosive impact on our politics and our culture. And then this is the really important part. I say, and I hope that some of this has entered into the thought process of those who listen and watch me on a regular basis. When you start thinking of things in these terms, you will read headlines in a different way. Not as one-offs, but as part of a much larger and troublesome picture. And then what I had planned, and by the way, I will probably do this via social media and show you all the images because too much work went into this and it's just too compelling. If the 1,000 people who voted on the poll question of the day today were assembled in front of me and I could do my PowerPoint presentation, I'm convinced I could turn them around and they would see that isolation is the reason why drinking is on the decline. We are not out and about and among other people. And among these stories that I was going to show, the story from the LA Times of the limited social interaction that many derive from a supermarket cashier, something now being lost in a self-service kiosk. Think of the interactions that you used to have that now, when you're using your smart device and you're not even interacting with somebody, just buying whatever your goods might be. I'm not even talking about Amazon. I could have said that Amazon is now rolling out, are you aware of this? Same day grocery delivery, I think in 1,000 different locations. People aren't even going to go to the supermarket anymore. And I know others have already been doing, a DoorDash kind of thing. But when Amazon enters that space, there's a huge area of no more social interaction. The drinking story. The drinking story was on my list to discuss. What else? Well, I was making a comparison to, people say, oh, it's a good thing that fewer are drinking. Not exactly. In the same way that when Gene Twangy came out with iGen and revealed how adolescents were having less sex, parents might say, oh, well, that's a good thing. Teenagers, they're not having sex. We don't want them to have sex. Unwanted pregnancies. Oh, okay, except there's a correlation between less sex, probably causation, and all the time they're spending in their bedrooms not having sex, but in front of screens. How about this one? I've talked about all these on the air, but I string them together, some of them now for you. I could give you dozens of examples. I'll say something about that in a moment. How about academics having recently calculated that our gait, the speed with which we walk, has increased 15% from 1980 to 2010. Michael, what the hell's that got to do with your mingling and your isolation? It's less time for idle chat. Head down, facing a screen, bustling along, instead of, hey, how are you? What's going on? How you doing? Right? How about this one? This was the one that was an epiphany for me. I mean, this is what gave rise. This was the starting point of my most recent Mingle presentation, which you can watch on air. And that is when we hit a point 2 years ago where for the first time, more than half of our school kids, very timely discussion right now, are being driven to school in a private vehicle instead of taking a yellow and black. And what we lose, all the life lessons and interaction, maybe not all of it pleasant, but important interaction that takes place on a school bus that you don't get when you're in the back seat of mom or dad's car. All those life lessons that I gleaned from bus number 5. And sticking with the education theme, and I'm going to stop because I don't want to go on for too long. But, sticking with the education theme, Rich Cohen wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal, was a great guest of mine on POTUS, talking about an essay that he wrote for the Wall Street Journal, reflecting on his own college experience and how he was like a Jewish kid from Long Island and he gets paired with a Texas football player, two total opposites. And it was life-changing for him because he learned lessons from his roommate that he would never otherwise have been able to recognize. And then he compared it to his own son's experience, which is all very, orchestrated in filling out forms and trying to be matched with just the right person. Maybe it's not just the right person. Maybe just the right person is the total opposite of who you are. I could go on and on and on. And as I was going to say on CNN, I could give countless other examples, all with the common denominator of a lack of shared experience by people of different backgrounds. And that's why I glom on to Bill Maher saying in 2022, our real division isn't between red and blue. It's between the people on both sides who aren't willing to mingle with Americans outside their political tribe, so they have no idea what they're really like. That's the problem facing our country. That is it. And that is a long-winded, maybe isolation was a bad word. Maybe I should have said mingling. But there's reason for good news. And I would have offered some of that as well on television, but you just got the Cliff's Note version. You just got the Cliff's Note version of the commentary that I had been eager to. I will probably deliver this next week on POTUS. I will probably deliver it on POTUS because, I'm all keyed up on it. I've got all the data at my fingertips, and I'm just so convinced. I mean, I am an evangelist on this idea that the polarization, I used to overemphasize the partisan media and the impact that they have on primary voters and politicians as a result. That's a huge part. But there's something bigger going on that I have boiled down shorthand to mingling. And I think you get it. I think you get it. All right. Thank you for hearing me out. I wanted to get that off my chest. And this is the perfect forum for me to do so. So please now go to smerconish.com and cast a ballot on today's poll question and tell me, why are fewer Americans drinking alcohol? It's because of isolation. And it's not a good thing. It's odd as it sounds. We'd be better off if more people were drinking. Think about that. Mull that over this weekend and do your part. Like and subscribe. Set yourself up for notifications. See ya.